right. I did the stream key.
Okay, now I'm live. I see it.
Okay.
Okay, great.
There's been a huge delay with YouTube lately.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Monday stream. We just kind of did it impromptu at the impromptu. So today we'll have some fun guests. We're gonna have Kayla on later today to talk about Peru, and then we're gonna have Dan Cohen and Hans on to talk about Mexico and Colombia, respectively. So with that, let me just kind of quickly review what happened. Let's see. So in Peru, there is an election going on, and they're still doing the counting. And it's a runoff phase, which is like the second phase. And the two main candidates is Pedro Castillo, who's a school teacher, and Keiko Fujimori, who is the daughter of the previous Peruvian president Alberto Fujimori, and she is very far to the right, and her dad is still in prison for corruption. Hello, Johnny Spinoza. And so it looks like Pedro Castillo is like a little ahead, but we are just yeah. So that's kind of what's going on. In Colombia, there have been protests and lots of just terrible things going on there. And Dan Cohen will talk about it. Like there's this Israeli security firm that's helping Ivan Duque do the death squads. So that's going on. And then in Mexico, they had an election in which AMLO or Andrés Manuel López Obrador. I just call him AMLO. Everyone calls him AMLO because it's kind of hard to say. Andrés Manuel López Obrador. That's his name. Okay. So Hans is going to come and talk a little bit about that. And basically it's. Yeah, so it's funny because it's Toast said, "Hello, Isha, thanks for streaming tonight." And I said, "Of course, this is fun. I did it last Monday and people had fun. So as long as people have fun and we learn stuff and everyone's happy, we can continue streaming." And then Dimitri Polekos said, "AMLO." Yep, AMLO. They've been trying to do these like smear pieces, so I kind of wanted to get that ahead of us. So we're just waiting on Kayla. She just texted me and said that she's coming. So we're just gonna wait for her with Peru. So there's like Peru has always had a really strange. Everything's been strange in Peru, I guess. They don't have a very strong left wing like the other South American countries, mostly because they've been purged. And then there is this like a really strange group called the Shining Path, and I don't know what to say other than it's very, very strange. And so we kind of want to talk about that a little because some people think it's like a CIA plot to discredit the left. Other people think that it is like really crazy people, but ultimately what we know is that they suck. Yeah, and like this year, mysteriously, like a few weeks ago when Pedro Castillo was looking to be good, after like 16 or 17 years, the Shining Path just came and went boom and did like a random attack. So that's kind of like lends credence to the theory that they are kind of doing BS.
Okay.
For lack of a better word.
Asha, Kayla's waiting. I'm gonna let her in.
Yeah, bring her in.
Bring her in now. Then I'll put her up where I am.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully that works. Yep. Well, keep going about your.
Okay. Well, welcome, Kayla. Kayla's from. She's also from New York. And she is a Peruvian ancestor. Oh, her parents are Peruvian, and so can you hear us, Kayla?
Wait, she's just coming back in now.
Okay.
She must have had an issue.
Okay. Matt P said hi, Isha, and I said hi, Matt P, and then Lumpia Logic said, "Hey, Kayla," and Kayla probably will say a hi back. but we're waiting for her. Yeah, she's in New York, and oh yeah, like
She's on. She's
we
on now.
yeah
Kayla, just so you know, you're muted right now. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah,
Hi.
sorry, I put myself on mute. Hi.
Hey, how are you doing? Thanks for coming on.
Thanks you for asking me. I'm excited. You look nice.
Thank you. So do you. Oh, did you have to work today, or was today like a relaxed day?
I wish it was a relaxed day. No, I had to work. They had me staying up late, like checking the polls, the official results, right? So I didn't go to sleep until like 2 in the morning. Had to be up at 8:30. The whole day, I'm just like,
Oh wow.
But we're really excited about the results. It's almost looking like basically Castillo won.
Oh, okay. So can you tell us about first of all, like, the election was yesterday, and when I fell asleep, it looked like Keiko Fujimori was slightly ahead. So what happened since yesterday to today?
Right. So at that moment, about last night, when I think the official results came out at Eastern Standard Time about 12:30 in the morning, Keiko was ahead. She was leading at like 52. Castillo was at 48, but that was only with. Sorry, that was only with 42% of the ballots actually counted, and majority of the ballots were coming from the urban region at that time. So for the rural regions, it definitely takes a little bit longer and especially also for the foreign votes. So it took a little bit longer. When I woke up, I think it was about 90% of the votes were counted in, and Keiko was leading by just a hair, and Castillo was still, a little not in a favorable light, right? He was still down up until it got to the 92%, 94%, when more of those rural votes started coming in. And that's when we saw just a slight, still just by a hair. And this isn't new. This isn't the first time. In fact, in 2016, that was the closest margin that there ever was in Peruvian history between two candidates. So it wasn't surprising to see that it happened again, but just by a hair. But now we see that Pedro Castillo is still leading, even still by a hair, and it's not really expected that the foreign votes that'll come in, because the only ones that we're still waiting on are from the United States. They haven't even been counted at all. And I can expect that a lot of those will go to Keiko Fujimori, but not enough to see if that she can completely flip it back. But what makes it a little scary to see that such a close call, like in 2016, you had Pablo Kuczynski, and you had Keiko Fujimori again, just by a hair, he won, but they weren't that different. Pedro Castillo and Keiko Fujimori are completely different, and it really just goes to show that like this country is kind of divided. It's intense.
Okay, so I was I was a little confused about Pedro Castillo until he got the Evo Morales endorsement, and then I was like, oh yeah, man. So like, what is his platform? What does he want to do?
So he was I supported in the first round of elections Veronica Mendoza, and she's very similar to Pedro Castillo. They want to nationalize Peru's major industries. He's not going to increase taxes on the rich. That's one thing that Veronica Mendoza did want to do, but he does want to nationalize all the major industries. And Peru is, the second most biodiverse country in the world. There's a lot of resources. I think it was Newsweek or one of these, U.S. based mainstream medias. They referred to Peru as the copper rich Andean nation, which this is how the West sees us. And Pedro Castillo said, no, okay, we are copper rich. We are extremely rich in so many different resources, so many different kind of crops. Your grapes, your other kind of vegetables will likely come from Peru. Potatoes, 3,000 different types of potatoes come from Peru. And he wants to nationalize this and to re-stimulate Peru's economy, bring that money and build up Peru's public healthcare sector, which is part of the reason why Peru is the worst COVID-affected country in the world. We have the highest death rates of COVID in the world, and yet we're such a small, population-wise, such a small country, because of the decimation that Fujimorismo has done to Peruvians' public healthcare sector. He wants to increase the public budget for education from 3.5%, so only 3.5% of Peruvian wealth, of Peruvian funds, go to the public education sector. He wants to increase that to 10%, which is also a little bit part of the problem why you find that this country is so divided, is because majority of people, even it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, you have no choice but to send your children to private school. So you'll have people going broke trying to send their children to private elementary school.
Why is that?
And along with that, Because Fujimorismo has completely killed the public education center. It's not possible to go to public school. If you go to public school, if you literally have nothing, if you are living on the street, then you have no other choice. But families will work. They'll get 3 jobs just to send their children to private schools so that they can have an education. It doesn't even need to be a decent one, just an education. Because Fujimorismo has completely killed anything that is public.
That's her dad?
Completely killed the public. So yes, so Alberto Fujimori, we are living under the constitution of the past 28 years that her father put in. So he did a self-coup, Keiko's father. Alberto did a self-coup in 1992, and to keep him. So he completely suspended the Congress and reinstalled himself as the president, even though he was already sitting president, and took out the existing constitution that had been existing, if I'm not mistaken, since the 30s, and created a new constitution without a conversation with the people. He created his own constitution. And this constitution made neoliberalism the state ideology. It imposed also a lot of articles that let politicians get away with crimes. For example, one of the articles I posted this about during the November protests, but one of the articles is that a politician, if they commit crimes during while they're in office, they cannot be charged until they leave office. But they can stop themselves from getting charged if they resign as soon as they commit the crime. So, for example, when Yes. So, for example, when those 2 young boys were killed during the Peruvian protests, you saw mass ministers and their staffers resigning because they didn't want to be held accountable for the murder of these 2 young boys. They resigned and said, "We're out of here." That's the same thing why Manuel Merino resigned. He said, "All right, first of all, you're going to take me out, so I don't want to be taken out, and 2, I don't want to be held accountable for these crimes, so I'm just going to resign." That's a product of Fujimorismo, and just a plethora of other.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at this one, and it says Article 16, of his constitution, gives people the right to private property and inheritance. Yikes.
Yeah. I mean, neoliberalism. That constitution made neoliberalism the ideology. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, and it makes it very difficult for you to try to achieve some accountability, to try to change the constitution, which is why it's not even just Pedro Castillo. A bunch of different parties there were saying we need a new constitution, just like the Chileans did. They voted to create a new constitution. That's what Pedro Castillo is trying to do: create a new constitution to get away with the remnants of Fujimorismo. Because it doesn't matter if Keiko wins or not. It doesn't matter if it was Johnny Lescano or if it's Francisco Sagasti. Fujimorismo, because of the constitution, because of the institutions, exists 100% still in Peru, even if Alberto Fujimori is in jail. So which is why we need a complete new Peru. We have a saying, refundar el Peru. We need to refound Peru.
Okay. Somebody in the comments asked, apparently they said, there are a lot of votes being nullified, and they said over 1 million votes. Is that true? And so how come?
I haven't seen if it's 1 million votes, but I did see it before that it was at least 5% of votes earlier were being nullified. And we don't know if they're Pedro Castillo voters or not. They likely are. We got to understand that, like I said before, all the institutions are held by the bourgeoisie, are held by the elite, are held by people that are supporters of Keiko Fujimori, that say we need to save Peru from the communism, from giving it back to its native people, re-giving it back to the campesinos, to the cholos. And so I'm not surprised if votes are being nullified that are votes that will be overwhelmingly going to Castillo. In Tumbes, even though it's funny because this district went to Keiko Fujimori, but a woman was arrested. She was a miembro de mesa for Keiko Fujimori, and she was arrested for stuffing in votes for Keiko Fujimori. Keiko Fujimori is notorious known to be corrupted, and Peru is, the corruption runs it's so drenched, it is so deep that it's not a surprise to see that there's going to be nullified votes for if and whatever reason. Oh, well, maybe so you're supposed to do an X in the box of who you're going for. Maybe the lines went a little bit too far. Oh, nullified it if it goes for Pedro Castillo. They have so much power, and their hands go really, really deep, and their money goes very deep. So I wouldn't be surprised. And that's, again, the bottom line reason that they do all this is to maintain the Fujimorismo, maintain capitalism, maintain imperialism in Peru at the expense of Peruvians. But, it's still beautiful to see that even with all the money that they have, all the power that they have, they control everything, Pedro Castillo is still leading.
Okay. So is it like, do you see him to be like an Evo Morales type of person?
Definitely, he wants to create a plurinational a plurinational republic of Peru. He comes from Cajamarca, and the indigeneity is a little bit different in Peru than I would say it is in Bolivia. Like the majority of Peruvians are native, and even the majority of the mestizos, the mestizaje in Peru is not the same as it is in the rest of Latin America. It's more of a cultural thing. When you move to Lima or you move to the bigger city and you become westernized, that is the mestizaje. So but we are a very extremely diverse country. I mean, we had a Japanese president, we had a Polish president, we have a huge Chinese diaspora, the Chinese population, Arab population, Native, Black, Afro. So it just makes sense that Pedro Castillo would want to bring in a plurinational republic, nationalize Peru's major industries, revitalize the economy, bring back the money. This is a saying translated. It's no more poor people in a rich country.
I love that. It's saying, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So I definitely do see him as an Evo Morales, but Peru, even though we have another saying too, I'm going off with the sayings, but another saying is that if all the countries in Latin America are siblings, then Peru and Bolivia are twins. And it's so true. Our people are so. I look at Bolivians and I'm like, we are the same people. But still, at the end of the day, Peru's path to liberation.
Oh, okay. Can you repeat what you said? Because I think basically it got cut off. So just quickly.
Okay. Yeah. So if all the countries in Latin America are siblings, Peru and Bolivia are twins.
That's okay. Got it. So I guess one thing is, can you talk a little bit about the Shining Path? And like recently they attacked some random school children and they hadn't actually done anything in almost 20 years. So what's up with that?
Yeah, there's a Shining Path attack every time there's a leftist candidate that's going in. In 2011, there was a Shining Path attack. In 2006, there was a Shining Path attack. And now there's a Shining Path attack. They haven't done anything in 20 years. There's like 11 Shining Path members and nobody knows who they are. I mean, to even say Shining Path is so silly. If anything, you want to say a Movadef, who is like a more legalistic arm of Shining Path. But what the reality was, and maybe we'll never really know for sure. We'll never know at this moment. But what I analyzed to be the analysis of what happened, and as many other Peruvians who are on the ground see it, is that these were paramilitaries that were supported by the right wing who sacrificed. To them, it's a sacrifice. What we see is an actual murder of 18 Peruvians for the sake of saying, oh, look, the Shining Path is coming back, and they're for some reason, at 20 years later, when there's a leftist on the ballot and Keiko Fujimori's on the ballot, now they decide to kill 18 people just a week before the election.
Yeah,
I mean, it's an insult to our intelligence. It doesn't make sense at all. But what they do that not to, because the people who were the first victims of Sendero Luminoso were also the same people who were the first victims of the Peruvian military, who were by far completely worse on 100 times than Sendero Luminoso could ever be. Sendero Luminoso had some ideological mistakes. They had some tactical errors, but the Peruvian military committed a genocide. And there's a clear distinction. We need to remember that clear distinction. These same people are the ones who are overwhelmingly going out and voting for Castillo. They were the people who overwhelmingly supported Sendero Luminoso. They were the same people who supported Velasco, who supported the labor strikes. There's a long history of people in this region continuing to support the leftist movements and the people on the coast. And the reason why they do this is to play among the fears of the people on the coast who never really even had that much contact with Sendero Luminoso, and therefore never really had that much contact with the military, because Sendero wasn't really as active. And not to say that it wasn't, because the military did commit murders along the coastal regions and in Lima as well. But they play among these fears to the coastal region, like, oh, look, Sendero Luminoso is coming back, when you can see the people who were living amongst Sendero Luminoso are still going out and overwhelmingly supporting the left, are still leftists. It's a slap in the face to our intelligence, and it's really shows how disgusting the paramilitary is and how disgusting the Peruvian right wing is, that for the sake of this election they would murder 18 people and then just to blame it on an inactive, irrelevant, non-existent group.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the Peruvian right wing, at least like Roderick showed me these texts that they were sending like to each other about like how they wanted to like slap, like, oh, this lady was like talking about how she wanted to like throw her maid off the balcony for voting for Castillo or something really unhinged. But yeah, it seems like
they're unhinged. The Latin American fascists are completely unhinged. There's nothing like it. My friend in Miami, so they were miembros de mesa. They were volunteers at the polling stations, and one girl got slapped in the face. They started screaming at them, using slurs against them. I mean, it's very. And it's all of Latin. I don't know why Latin American fascists are like this, but they are extremely unhinged. They are extremely volatile. In the neighborhood, of Surquillo, it's a neighborhood in Lima, and it's actually so there's a few neighborhoods in Lima that are more upscale, and I would like to talk about that a little bit, the Lima stuff, but this is an upscale neighborhood, and there was this one woman who decided that she was going to vote for Peru Libre, and she had to walk with her hands up in the air because the whole neighborhood was like surrounding her, screaming at her, slurring her, just being absolutely volatile for voting for Pedro Castillo. She had to walk home with her hands in the air to show, like, I'm not doing anything. It's all you guys. These people are rabid. These people in Miraflores and Borjas, San Isidro, Surquillo, they are rabid. And what's also shocking, because you see coming out of Lima, is that there's a strong support for Keiko Fujimori. My family's from Lima. My family's from Rimac. They're from Callao. They're from Comas. These are not rich areas. Lima is not by any means. It's a center of capital, but you would say it's like comparing the Upper East Side to Brownsville in New York. I mean, it might be the same city, it might be the same region, but it's very, very different. But it just goes to show how much power and how much influence that the wealthy in Peru have over the mentality of the masses of people who would benefit from Pedro Castillo's own policy. In Lima, outside of like the center of Lima, the wealthier part of the city, there's a wall to separate it from the slums of the rest of Lima.
Wow.
I mean, these Limeños are also suffering, but they're under the boot of this propaganda. They're going to the universities that the elites, make them pay for. They're going to the universities and the middle schools and the high schools and the elementary schools that are all private because they have to go to private education. They're surrounded by, the heart of all the mainstream media that is bought and is known to be bought by the rich, that has Fujimoristas working for them. So they're surrounded by it, and their fears are, okay, well, we just want to save the democracy. We just, don't want communism because that's going to make us like Venezuela. And there's the historical propaganda against, oh, well, look at the Venezuelans. They're coming out into this, they're sleeping in the streets of Lima. They're engaged in violence. They're doing this. And they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to be forced into that. There's a lot of miseducation, unfortunately, that is extremely concentrated in Lima because even since the colonial era, Lima has been the bastion of foreign influence and capital. I mean, it took forever for the Republicans to free Lima, so much so that Argentinians and Chileans had to come into Lima, had to come into Peru and say, we're independent. The man that declared Peruvian independence was an Argentinian.
Yep, Jose Marti. I saw that in the movie Bolivar.
Yeah. Oh, no, Jose de San Martin, yes.
Yeah. But okay, Dimitri has a question. He said, I'm more interested in the self-coup. Did he use the military to sweep out dissidents and then allow military hierarchy more power, like Batajas in Greece? If so, how will the military react to the election? So that's a very good question. Do you know?
Yeah, so Vargas Llosa even said it earlier today, and he's a famous Peruvian figure. He was saying, well, and this is so much for the face of we need to vote for Keiko to save democracy. I mean, save the so-called Peruvian democracy. Now that it looks like Pedro Castillo is winning, they're like, we need to use a military coup. The likelihood, I don't know if I could say how much the likelihood is. I mean, I'm not part of the military, but I wouldn't be surprised if they would. The military is extremely reactionary and, has never changed. The political character, the political nature of the military has never changed since when they led a genocide. Nobody was, all but 10, 11, 15 people were held accountable for the genocide, for the forced sterilizations. 15 people? Nothing has changed with the military. They look at the Peruvian people, and you could see this coming out of the protests in November. I remember, I'll never get it out of my head, this one video of this police officer, and he was trying to hold a gun at this young boy, and the other officer was next to him saying, kill him, kill him, kill him. And the police officer was in the back saying, I'm trying, but my gun is stuck. Because his gun was stuck, the kid was saved. It was able to run away. But I mean, this is who they are. This is what they are 100% entrenched with the far right, with the right-wing state, that they see their own people as dogs, as nothing, scum on the street. It's an us versus them thing. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if given the right enough amount of money and the right orders, that there would be a military coup carried out. But then, you have the other contradiction where you have a massive amount of people who are not, and just like in Bolivia, they're not going to go down without a fight. And so either way, whether Keiko wins, whether Castillo wins, Peru is going to have a bumpy path ahead of itself. If Keiko wins, you can just predict, you can just expect that there's going to be a mass revolt, probably a national strike, a general strike. If Castillo wins, you can expect that all the institutions, the tools of the state, the police, the military, the courts, the wealthy, the imperialists, they're all going to unite against Castillo at the expense of Castillo. And so to make the Venezuela thing, go ahead.
Would it be like how, okay, so I don't know if you remember, you may be too young for this, but when Evo Morales first went on, it was very, I mean, they actually hired like this Montenegrin paramilitary death squad to have a race. Like, it was horrific.
I heard
do you expect that level of like paramilitary violence there?
I wouldn't be surprised, because I know that it's happened before, and nothing has ever changed. We had a death squad. I mean, that's why Alberto Fujimori is sitting in jail, because there was a death squad that was hired, and it was created by him and it was funded by the United States via Vladimiro Montesinos, this is why he's sitting in jail, for a Grupo Colina group. So I wouldn't be surprised, because it's happened before, and because Lima it's a heart of capital for South America. Like, imagine Bogota is, Washington, D.C. It is a lot of militaristic power, but Lima is more like a New York. It is a financial heart. It is in the center of, a lot of trade, a lot of commercial. A flight to Lima, you could get a flight to Lima for tomorrow or within next week for like $400 round trip, because there's always so much traffic going in and out of Lima, because it's such a strong center for capital, for trade, for traffic, for traveling through. So for Lima to succumb to it, it's one thing with Bolivia, and you saw the way that they reacted with Bolivia, but it's one thing for Bolivia. It's another thing that Peru is the second most biodiverse country in the world, and it has Lima, which is like a New York City for South America. It's not going to be an easy road, and I think Peru Libre knows that. They know that.
And Peru Libre is Castillo's party, right?
Correct.
So and hold on. So somebody else asked, is there any difference in reactionary views and class composition between the military leadership, generals, and the rank and file?
I mean, the class composition, of course, but you could expect that in any other place in the world. You have the rank and file are coming from your working class backgrounds. They're going into the police force, going into the military, thinking that they're going to do good by their community, but it's the corruption is completely entrenched with it. And then you have your generals who are being bought off and sold off and following the commands of whoever is giving them enough money to do so. There is no such thing as sovereignty in Peru. It's all about money. It's all about who is going to pay you the most. It's fully corrupt. And so some of the qualms I have with Peruvian activists is that they focus so much on the corruption, but not have like a class analysis about it, because it's not corruption just because it exists out of nowhere. There's corruption because we've never fully dealt with the remnants of Fujimorismo. We've never fully dealt with the fact that the elite are able to control and sell off Peru without any accountability, and that there are no institutions that will hold them accountable. That Peru needs a completely new system. There's not like we can reform this and we can reform that. It needs a new constitution. The military needs to be purged. And a similar thing that they did in Venezuela, but also, Chavez did have the military support, but they purged the military. They purged the police force because it was necessary to do so. And it is completely necessary to do so in Peru. It needs a new constitution. It needs new judges. It needs a whole new political system, because the corruption is just so entrenched with it. Because the thing about Peru is like, it's such a rich country, but it's so overexploited. It's just sold off to the highest bidder, by those who have the power in it. And it's impossible to get consolidation, to centralize everything when everyone's just trying to sell off a piece of their country. Well, everyone that has power is trying to sell off a piece of their country. And it's just disgusting.
Wow. Okay, so it looks like right now with I believe like with almost 95.5% of the votes in, it still looks like Castillo is leading by about a little over 200,000 votes. I'm a little off because it's like my mental math skills is not that good. Hold on. Okay, so what? Also, like I guess one thing people are wondering is, how will the U.S. empire react to this election? Have they made their wishes known? Like with Evo Morales, they were like so obvious.
They haven't made their wishes known just yet. There hasn't been any talk of what's going to happen just yet. But I have been noticing that a lot of the media has been making these articles against Castillo. The way that I see it, if Castillo wins, is what they're going to play on is painting him as this anti-democratic dictator. You know, in the U.S., what they've especially been trying to do, both the Peruvian diaspora that's here, and with these, mainstream medias, is that, yeah, Keiko Fujimori is the daughter of a dictator, but she's the only one that's going to save the Peruvian democracy. There is no democracy in Peru. What is it? It is a bourgeois democracy. It's not a real democracy. It's a bourgeois democracy. It's a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. And so they're going to make the conversation to go, oh, well, look at Pedro Castillo. He's anti-LGBTQ. He's anti-women. He's a dictator. He hates the LGBTQ community. He is impeding on these minorities. And they're going to make it a human rights thing, when really the problem that they're going to be really upset with is the fact that he's going to nationalize all of Peru's major industries.
Well, it's the industries right now.
So we have a lot of mining, we have a lot of agriculture. I think I said this a little bit earlier, but there's a lot of the grapes that you get in the United States, they come from Peru. I remember when there was labor strikes happening in Ica, maybe in December, January, and they were producing grapes. And I would look and see, if these are from Peru, I can't buy them. But copper, uranium, sodium nitrate, Peru is extremely, extremely rich. We could sit here all day and talk about how much resources come out of Peru. Because you got to think about it. Peru is a country that is bordering the Pacific coast, has some of the richest areas of the Pacific Ocean in terms of like fisheries and the mariscos, those kind of resources. And then you have the Andean mountains that have a plethora of vegetable crops, all sorts of stuff, fruits, potatoes, 3,000 different types of potatoes. I can't even get over that we have 3,000 different types of potatoes, bananas, all sorts of like vegetables, right? And then you go into the jungle, la selva, and this is the Amazon. And you already know how deeply, deeply rich the Amazon is. You go to the south of Peru, there's mining, there's copper, there's lithium, sodium. There's so much earthly resources. The only country that is more rich in terms of diversity is Brazil.
Okay, wow. And so, okay, hold on. Okay, somebody asked, another question is, who on the right could rise as a Guaido Áñez type of figure that doesn't have the corruption investigation?
The first person that comes to mind to me is George Forsyth, but that's just because he's actually a Venezuelan escualido himself that immigrated to Peru. But who could come out as a stronger political contender? I would have to take a look at who exactly is sitting in Congress right now. I'm not sure that there's anybody that's been groomed just yet for that to be said.
Okay, Bloomberg is already making like some insane claims, like markets tumble as Castillo passes Fujimori in the runoff count, which is a little outrageous, I think.
Good, let them tumble. Let your markets tumble. I hope your stocks go down.
Okay, and also, like, how bad? I forgot. Is there in Bolivia? There's a big racial component between people who live in the mountains and people who live in the Media Luna section. Is there the same racial component in Peru, or not really?
It's difficult because yes and no. It's not so much about racial, because this is the funniest thing about Peru. You will have somebody who you'll have somebody who looks indigenous, and you'll have another person who looks indigenous. But this person is a farmer, and they wear traditional clothing. They wear a poncho. They they have an accent, and you'll have the person who looks exactly like them, but wears, regular, like, Western-looking clothing, lives in the city, is in a proletariat, less of a farmer, but works in, like, some type of service industry. And they will look down on them. They will look down on the peasant and maybe call him a cholo, maybe call him a serrano, something like that. So it's like pseudo-racial, because these are people that literally look exactly the same. They probably, have the same ancestry, and they recognize that they do. But it's more about, like, regional. It's more about cultural. But that being said, the elite in Peru, just like anywhere in Latin America, the elite in Peru are definitely extremely racist, really, really nasty. I mean, I named these neighborhoods before, and Miraflores, San Isidro, San Borja, Surquillo. This is where the Peruvian elite live, and the European population in Peru is so extremely small than, like, any other country besides Bolivia, any other country in South America. So it's when you see somebody who's, like, light skinned in Peru, and whenever I see somebody who's a light skin, like, I'm talking about a white Peruvian, I'm, like, a little shocked, like, I forgot y'all existed, because they're such a minority, but they have so much power, so much influence, so much money, and they are just absolutely disgusting to Peruvian, the real, like, or rather the masses of Peruvian people. They'll call them cholos. They insinuate that people who vote for Pedro Castillo, the people from these areas, are ignorant and they're stupid and they don't have correct education and all sorts of just nasty, nasty things. I've seen people, these same influencers, these same elites in these neighborhoods make jokes about going and burning the Amazon down again.
Does Peru have a portion of the Amazon?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yeah, we have the other portion of the Amazon, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, that's kind of frightening. And
yes.
You also mentioned that Peru had one of the worst hit COVID outbreaks. Like, what happened?
It has the worst.
So what's going on there?
So like I said before, similar thing with education. Public healthcare is almost non-existent. At the start of the pandemic, then President Vizcarra did threaten to. There's another part in the Constitution that says we can expropriate your industries for whatever need be. He threatened all the clinics that if you don't lower your prices, because people are dying because they can't afford to go to you. If you don't lower your prices, we have no choice but to expropriate you. So they lowered it just a little bit, just to make it, but it was still completely unaffordable because nobody has jobs, nobody's working right now, nobody can eat. There's hardly any access to hospital care. You won't be shocked to find Cuban doctors online calling for media attention. Please let me get my patient a hospital bed. I mean, it's just little access to oxygen. The people are dying. There's like, and that's just even at the coastal regions. Just imagine in the rest of the country where there's just so little infrastructure. And myself, I've traveled through Cusco, and I remember going through places where there was no toilets. You pee in a hole in the ground and you dump a bucket of water. And now you're telling me that what are we supposed to do when these people need hospital beds? Oh, sorry, just give me a moment. I need to grab my charger.
Take your time. So far I'm looking at trying to look for the latest election results, and it looks like okay, so it looks like Pedro Castillo has like 50. Of course, okay. So I'm actually reading out what Schlab Comandante says. Pedro Castillo has gotten 50.26%, and Keiko Fujimori has gotten 49.73% with 95.76% counted. And so it does look like he is going to be ahead still, which is good. Can we let's see, is there going to be any screwing up with the ASCOA or the other one? I can't remember the other one. What is the other one called? I can't remember them off the top of my head. Okay. So Peru also has on the top of the political unrest, the Peruvian economy contracted by 12.9% in 2020, among the worst in Latin America, and the country is reported the second highest COVID death per capita in the world at the end of the year. And voting is mandatory for adults aged 18 to 70. Additionally, the election serve.
You guys okay?
Yeah. Well,
You went
okay.
quiet
So,
for a
anyways,
minute.
Kiko Fujimura said that. Okay. This is a weird question. In an interview last month, Kiko Fujimura said she'd offer a Demodura, which is a play on democracy, and Mano Dura. So, what does that mean? And that's kind of psycho if she's openly admitting to, like, right?
Being a strong woman and bringing back democracy as a stronghold. Yes. So Keiko Fujimori was since 2016, she became de facto a party parliamentary leader because their party received an overwhelming majority in the 2016 elections in Congress. And in doing so, Keiko Fujimori has, claimed, and she was probably right, but she's not one to talk, especially that every other leader, that all the other presidents, all the other Congress, all the other really different sectors of the bourgeoisie were corrupt. She has been instrumental in taking out three Peruvian presidents at once. So that's Keiko. That's Keiko. She led one of the most corrupt Congresses in Peruvian history of 138 of 130
hold on.
of
You
them.
say that she is under investigation while she's running the election? Like, how does that work?
She's on a conditional release from prison.
How does that work?
It's Peru. She's on a conditional release of prison.
So okay. So if she if she loses, like, what's going on? Like, if she
if she loses, she could face going back to prison. She's looking at going back to prison, which is why she's especially has everything at stake to not lose this election.
Okay, so if she wins, she gets to stay out of prison until the next term.
Exactly. She could, keep herself out of prison. If she goes back to prison, she's looking at 30 years. She's 46.
How old is her? How many years is her dad in prison for?
So he got a couple of 25, because there's no such thing as a life sentence in Peru.
Oh.
So he got a couple of 25-year sentences, and he's still on trial. This has been delayed because of COVID, but he's still facing trial for the forced sterilizations of the thousands of Native women.
Oh my God! Can you elaborate a little bit about this forced sterilization? I'm like, it's hard for me to even imagine this, but
it was really sad. So, in response to Sendero Luminoso, doing their insurgency, the Peruvian state was like, okay, we have to go and send the military into these regions and kill people, right? A large part of Sendero Luminoso's base and their members were Native people, campesinos. I think that's a better word. I mean, because it's kind of weird. Again, the way that indigeneity works, like most Peruvians are indigenous. Most Peruvians have indigenous ancestry. So we use mostly like campesinos in the campo, the country people, the country people, peasants, right? So majority of them were a part of Sendero Luminoso, and a majority of them supported Sendero Luminoso, or a lot of them did, right? They had between 40 to 60% of territory. Not all of them, but a lot of them did. And so the military and the Peruvian state were like, okay, so the campesinos, the people of these regions, are the enemy. So in turn, they would kill people almost indiscriminately. If you were a campesino, you need to tell us some information about Sendero Luminoso. If you don't have any information, poof, you get killed. And also for the forced sterilization, that comes in because there was this idea that these Native women, these campesino women, were creating communist babies. And so we get away the problem if we sterilize them, if we just kill the Native, if we kill kill the campesina, and we kill their baby, then they won't have communist babies, and we won't have to worry about this anymore. So that was some of the reasoning behind the forced sterilizations. Also, that's part of the genocide, sterilizing thousands of women so that they can't reproduce and get rid of this ethnic group, which is kind of weird to think because this is the majority of your country, especially at that time. This is the majority of your country. Oh well.
So okay, And how long was he president for, Fujimori?
So he was in from 1990, and he was about 10 years. About 10 years.
Oh, okay. Wow. And so, okay, that sounds horrible. Like, and was he supported by the U.S. for the whole time, or not really, or kind of?
Absolutely. Until the end. Until the end, when they were like, "Oh, he committed crimes against humanity. We don't know about that." But they absolutely were. He was, they were receiving funding to fight the Maoist insurgents, the terrorists. We need to fight them. He was receiving U.S. aid. Where do you think Polino Group and Vladimir Montesinos got the assistance from, got the training from? Vladimir Montesinos was kicked out of the Peruvian military for working with the CIA.
Wow. Okay. So that is very it sounds like very messed up. And okay, so like what has oh, okay.
Hey, Asha, do you
Okay, Dimitri, hold on. Dimitri Dimitri has one question. She had to ask to campaign outside of her city, but she's not allowed to leave the country, right? I think he's talking about Keiko Fujimori.
Yes, she's not allowed to leave the country. She tried to go to Ecuador for Lasso's inauguration, and she was denied. She's not allowed to leave the country because she's on a conditional release from prison.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is the president. This is going to be the president, right? She can't even leave the country.
Wow. That's crazy. Okay. So, if you're around, please stick around. But we have Hans on. So, Hans, can you hear us? Hello?
Hi, yeah.
So, how are you doing? And thanks for coming so quickly. Hans is here to talk about Mexico. So, can you quickly let us know what happened in the recent elections and what's going on and everything?
Sure. I just have a question. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Okay. Well, in this midterm elections, there were elections for 15 governorships in Mexico, and for the Chamber of the Deputies, which is the lower chamber of the Congress of the nation. So, well, if we look at the results, they are kind of mixed, in my own opinion. Some people will say that the opposition did really well, and other people says that AMLO and Morena did really well. But in my opinion, they're a little bit mixed, because even though Morena did pretty great in the sense that they retained the majority in the Chamber of Deputies, obviously relying with the coalition partners, but still they got the majority. They lost the ability to change the constitution, which they had before. They used to have 2/3 in the Chamber of Deputies, with the coalition partners, of course. But now they just got a little bit over half of the Chamber of Deputies. But still, they did better than the opposition, which they claimed they would win a majority, and their sole objective was to beat AMLO and not let him do like pass any sort of law. But at least they didn't win. And in the case of the governorships, Morena did somewhat better than I expected, to be honest. Back 3 months ago, Morena had like the possibility of winning 14 out of 15 governorships. Now they only won 11. Well, it's not clear yet, but it's really probable that they will win 11. But before yesterday, polls actually showed that Morena would win 7. So you know what I mean. They didn't get 14 like they originally could, but they didn't win 7, which was the more conservative estimate. The bad thing though is that Mexico City, which is known as a stronghold of Morena and a really progressive city in Mexico, got really divided in the sense that half of the municipalities went to the opposition, while half of the municipalities went to Morena. And actually the city got divided, the West voted for the opposition and the East voted for Morena. But there is a clear like racial and class difference. Like all the municipalities from Mexico City, which voted for Morena, were poor municipalities, were more people of color, indigenous people, while with the municipalities that voted for the opposition, they were wealthier
Uh-huh.
and whiter. So
Okay, so the opposition had like all of the opposition parties did have a unity ticket, right?
most of them, yeah, like um, PAN, the main right-wing party, the National Action Party, PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, which used to govern Mexico from 1929 to the 2000s, and then again from 2012 to 2018 with Peña Nieto, and the PRD or PRD, which is the Party of the Democratic Revolution, which used to be the main center-left party before AMLO and Morena, took over.
Mm-hmm.
They united in a single ticket uh, and a coalition, and there's another party which is named Movimiento Ciudadano or Citizens Movement, and they're kind of weird. They're kind of like centrist. They want to portray themselves as like an alternative to Morena and the other, opposition. And then there's the, Morena and its allies. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I've been like seeing some kind of regime change propaganda. What's up with that? What's going on there?
Yeah, there's been a lot of efforts, to push for regime change. Especially since 2019, I remember when the issue with the Bolivarean family. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Mm-mm.
With
Do tell
the
us.
Okay, back in 2019, um, there's a family in the state of Sonora, which is in the north. It borders Arizona, and there are a lot of colonies from U.S. Mormons. Like they've been
Ah.
living there for a while, yeah, because since the U.S. Made polygamy illegal and stuff, they ended up um, leaving the U.S. and they came to Mexico to Sonora, which is you know it is a state which is really big and there's a lot of land which is
Uh-huh.
not claimed by anybody. So they started to do like small colonies of Mormons, like U.S. Mormons, and they're all white and stuff. And the thing is that they are in an area which is at the center of a fight between drug cartels. So they have had to resist a lot of violence from cartels and stuff. The thing is that some members of the Bolivarean family were murdered by drug cartel members, and basically the U.S. media took that because they're U.S. citizens
Uh-huh.
technically, even though they were born in Mexico, they are U.S. citizens.
Uh-huh.
So the U.S. media started to use that story to paint Mexico as a violent, helpful. Even though, yeah, we have a lot of violence, like that's true, but it's not like something that originated with AMLO and Morena. They were already here before, and I remember that even some, like senators from the U.S. were calling for military intervention in Mexico, like Cotton, I think that's his last name. From
Wow.
He's a Republican, I think. Yeah, and
Tennessee
obviously the
OTTON? Yeah, he's probably psycho. Yeah, he's totally psycho.
yeah, 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 and obviously the opposition here used that story to like show, hey, the U.S. wants to even intervene in our matters because you can't manage anything, when it
Oh,
comes
wow.
to AMLO. And then there's another case, which is what happened in Sinaloa, where um, the Sinaloa cartel has a lot of power there. Sinaloa is well known in Mexico as being like the capital of drug cartels and stuff
Uh-huh.
because of the power that a lot of drug cartels have there, especially the Sinaloa cartel, which is the cartel of El Chapo, who is really well known globally. So the Mexican military um, captured the son of El Chapo, in Culiacan, which is the capital of the state of Sinaloa.
Uh-huh.
And what happened is that the Sinaloa cartel basically got crazy because one of their leaders got captured, and they threatened the government that with doing a massacre in the city. So they took over many streets of the city, and there were a lot of shootings, and AMLO basically had to decide to let go, the son of El Chapo, so he could prevent, like a slaughter. And the opposition used that opportunity to, like paint AMLO as being bad on crime and stuff, which
Okay.
is, yeah, go on.
Oh, okay. So it's okay. So there's another question I have. It seems like our vice president is there today or tomorrow. Like, what's going on with her?
Oh yeah, Kamala Harris. If I'm correct, to be honest, I haven't paid a
Don't
lot
worry
of
about it.
attention to that. Yeah, because I've been seeing more about the elections. But if I'm
Okay.
correct,
AMLO, I know when he first got on, he promised to like amend the constitution. So is that not going to happen, or what's going on there now?
well, he changed the constitution to create the National Guard. That was one of the main objectives that he had. Actually, he has faced a lot of opposition, not only from the right but even from the left, because um, it gives more power to the military. And when it comes to national security matters and public security matters, so cities like mine, Tijuana, have a lot of soldiers in the streets. Like it's not just the police doing the policing, like it's also the military. That's really common, and
Okay.
that's one of the things he changed. But when it comes to the neoliberal reforms by Peña Nieto, he has changed some of them. Like he gave more power to Pemex, which is the state-owned company of Mexico. And even though Morena hasn't really tried to nationalize new things, at least they have tried to not privatize, to prevent the further privatization of Pemex, which is the state-owned company, and the CFE, which is the state-owned electricity company of Mexico.
Okay. So he is okay. Let me see if we have any questions. Oh, actually, okay. Kayla, are you still here? Okay. It doesn't matter. Okay, well, we can ask this question later. But I guess what in Mexico, each president can only stay for one term, and then they have to
Yeah.
rotate out, right? Like, what's going to happen next?
You mean like who could be the predecessor
No,
of
no, no, no. So, like,
AMLO?
is it true that each president can only stay for one term, and then they have to rotate out for a term before they get reelected?
No, Mexico only has one term. They can't get reelected later or anything. They can only have one term.
Okay. How come?
Yeah, it used to be, well, it used to be for all politicians and all, like seats in government, but it is slowly changing a little bit. Well, the reason why this happened is because Mexico had a dictatorship with Porfirio Diaz back in the 19th century, where he governed for about 31 years. Yeah, and the Mexican Revolution happened in 1910, and he left, the presidency due to the revolution. And then Mexico still had re-election, but only like like 2 terms for 4 years. But Álvaro Obregón, who was one of the revolutionaries, he became president and he tried to get re-elected for a third time. So he got assassinated because of that.
Wow.
And yeah, and what the government decided to do is that Mexico would only have one term of 6 years when it came to like the presidency and governorships and senators. and with deputies who are, like from the lower chamber and mayors, they would only get 3 years. But now that's slowly changing. Like since 2015, if I'm correct, there was a reform which now allows for mayors, senators, and deputies to get reelected, and they have term limits of 12 years, which, in my opinion, it's maybe a sign that Mexico might change toward that direction when it comes to governors and presidents. But I don't think it will happen now, because if AMLO and Morena did it, it will be suicidal, because Mexicans are still really, 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 really against the concept of re-election. Like, that's something the government basically teaches us, and in school and stuff, that re-election is bad because it can lead to a dictatorship. Even though I think that that's pretty dumb, because Mexico didn't have a dictator, didn't have re-election in the 20th century, and still the PRI got 71 years of total power.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
And if it's like the same party, you might as well have a dictatorship.
Yeah, it was basically a dictatorship, but Mexico had
with elections. New faces.
Yeah, it basically had elections, and the president changed every 6 years, and there was an opposition, even though most of it was controlled, and the left was banned. There weren't any leftist parties in most of the 20th century, because like the PRI put on a policy which was against radicalism, so it basically banned fascist parties, but also basically anything which was to the left of the PRI. So socialists, communists, and all of them got banned. And then the laws changed in the 70s, but still the damage was already done, to the left, and all the political persecution to leftist groups and stuff. So.
Oh wow. And has that? It seems like so far AMLO stuff. Even AMLO is more centrist than, say, Evo Morales or even Cristina Kirchner in Argentina. So so what's been going? But it seems like it is a step forward compared to what it used to be. Do you agree or do you disagree, or what do you have comments about that?
Okay. With AMLO and Morena, they are definitely better than the PRI and PAN. I mean, it's difficult to imagine anything worse. Unless you put on literal fascists. I mean, it's really difficult to find anything worse than PAN and the PRI. Maybe, someone like Bolsonaro, definitely his worst. But, Bolsonaro is crazy. But
Bolsonaro is nuts.
Yeah, he's basically a Nazi, he's a fascist. But with AMLO and Morena, yeah, they're more centrist, and I don't really like characterizing Morena as a leftist party. It is more of a...
Okay, hold on. Somebody asked, can you talk about the government repression against the normalistas?
Against the normalistas? You mean during the Peña Nieto years?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with Peña Nieto, there was a really big scandal, which was the assassination of the normalistas in 2014, if I'm correct.
Can you tell us about it? I know nothing about it.
Okay, yeah, it happened in Ayotzinapa, Guerrero. They were basically a group of students who wanted to go to a protest, and the military and the federal police, if I'm correct, it was the federal police, they intercepted the buses of the normalistas and the students, and there was a shooting and stuff. Some of them got killed, and they kidnapped the students.
The military kidnapped the students.
Yeah, and they got disappeared. And
how many students was that?
43 students. And nobody knows what happened to them, even though um, what's pretty obvious is that they gave the students to drug cartels. Like they
they
handed
like
them over to drug cartels,
to do what?
and nobody really knows yet, like exactly
Wow.
what happened. AMLO is, at least what he says is that he's investigating on that. There's like a program to look on that. There's not a lot of results yet,
Is there any?
but
Oh, okay. So did Nieto even try to?
no, he basically there were some researchers from Argentina who came here, and they said that the students were killed, but the government tried to like change the narrative, and to like
How do
how
they
can I
know the
say it?
students were killed? Like, did they find bodies, or was it just based on other evidence?
I mean, some remains were found, if I'm
Okay.
correct, that they were incinerated, but
Wait,
there's
the bodies were. Whoa, that's weird. Okay,
yeah, but
so we're probably never gonna find them.
yeah, that's probably the case. I don't think they will get found, but Peña Nieto really tried to clean the image of the military and to try to wash his hands and basically say that they had nothing to do with the incident, even though everybody knows that. I mean that he he took part of it, because it was the military. Like it's
Oh
not
wow,
just the municipal police, like it's also the military and stuff. So yeah,
that's crazy.
um, yeah, and I mean, cases like that are the reason why a lot of Mexicans are really angry about the situation of the country, because I think that a lot of the support that AMLO has and Morena is not really like actual support for him, because he's really centrist, in my opinion. He's really centrist, and Morena has done a lot of errors. But the thing is that people still have that image of how the years were with the PRI and with PAN, that they don't want to return to that. Like, for example, in my state, there were elections, local elections for governorship, government, and Morena won with like they won everything. They won all the districts for the local congress. They won all the mayorship elections. They won the governorship, and I mean they didn't do it with as many votes as in 2019, because in 2019 we had as well local elections, but they still won everything. And I think that it's because people still have in mind, like the past governments, especially considering how my state was a stronghold of PAN, which is the main right-wing party. But PAN governed here for about 30 years, and violence got pretty intense in my state. Also, the corruption cases, how our government stole millions, which would go to the to universities, to hospitals, and he had also ties with organized crime. So people still have all of that in mind. And also my state had a pretty far right candidate from a pretty small party, which used to be a coalition partner of Morena back in 2018. I don't know if you remember that AMLO and Morena had a coalition with PES, which is a Christian
Oh yeah,
party.
now I remember. Long time ago.
Yeah, back then they lost their party registry because they don't have any support, and they got their registry again, and they competed in these elections, but alone, because electoral law prevents new parties from forming coalitions, because they have to prove that they have support.
So the
So
old part. Okay, I see. So they can't have a coalition because they're now
yeah,
starting from zero. Okay, so
yeah,
we have
exactly.
we have one question. What was the deal with all the assassinations of political candidates? And another question is, I heard a lot of candidates have been assassinated. If true, what candidates were targeted? Who targeted them, and why?
Okay. This is kind of difficult to define because it will be really from a case basis, you know?
Okay.
But when it comes to political parties, actually, I think all political parties have been targets of assassination. Like if I'm completely honest, maybe at the top of the list is Morena, but I mean the PRI, PAN, PRD, they are also there, you know. But it's basically drug cartels. They are
Ah,
usually the ones who are behind the assassinations. So let's say that if a politician has a deal with one drug cartel, the rivals are going to go for him. Or if a drug cartel, or you know, a politician wants to be against a certain drug cartel, they want to be actually good and they want to fight crime, they will get murdered by drug cartels. Like that's usually what happens. And there's been a lot of violence also in these elections. Like I saw that in my city, just in my city, there were severe heads that were thrown in voting stations, and
wow.
human remains were found in streets. Like in one
Wow.
street, they were found human remains, and I don't remember if it was in my city or in the capital of my state that the offices of Morena were the target of a shooting. So yeah, usually that's how violent the Mexican elections are. And I'm just talking about my state, you know? But in other states, it's probably the same or even worse in rural areas.
Wow. That's shocking. Um, okay. Let's see. Do you have any other questions? Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay. Somebody asked like, how big of a role do the drug cartels have in the Mexican political landscape?
Oh, well, well, they have a really big role, I think. Not like the how how the U.S. tends to paint Mexico as like being literally controlled by drug cartels, like not
Mm-hmm.
like to that level, you know. But they definitely have a lot of power, especially with how usually governors have ties with criminal
Ah.
organizations. Like for example, during the PAN era with Felipe Calderon, who was the one who
Oh, he's the
initiated.
far right guy, right? Who's like real, like who's like an inheritor of lots of money. Felipe
Um,
Calderon, right? Far right.
Felipe Calderon, I don't know if I would put him on the far right, but he's definitely right wing. Like I'm not
Uh
saying
huh.
he's not right wing, but he's not like a Bolsonaro kind of
Okay.
character. Like he's not like that kind of
No, he's respectable
person.
actually.
Because here in Mexico we don't really have politicians who are like Bolsonaro
God.
or like Trump or like the
God.
populist right in Europe, like Marine Le Pen. Like we don't really have those kind of people, who are like more concentrated on like fighting, you know, I don't know, cultural Marxism and stuff like that. Like we
Yeah.
don't really have those kinds of politicians because our right wing is more like, how can I say
Financial.
it? What? Sorry?
Financial.
Yeah, more like that kind of right wing and with more establishment, I would say.
Okay.
Like not populist, I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say that. Then Felipe Calderon, he initiated the drug war, obviously with help from the U.S. And not only that, he had ties with the Sinaloa cartel.
Mm.
So basically, the drug war that he initiated, and which we still have to this day, was a war that he commenced in order to help the Sinaloa cartel because he only attacked rival
Ah.
cartels
So
of the
he was
Sinaloa.
like, oh, I see. Like, so he was like involved. Like, so he was in cahoots with one cartel, and he was attacking the rival cartels as a crackdown, as
Yeah,
opposed to like attacking all drug cartels.
exactly. And basically what he would do is that he would go for the heads of the cartels. Like he would kill the cartel leaders, like the
Ah.
military would kill them. And what would happen is that drug cartels, instead of disappearing, new drug cartels would come up because
Ah.
they would get destabilized and they would get fractioned, and new drug cartels and more dangerous drug cartels would like
Come up.
will be brought up. And besides that, also the US did have um, you know we can still blame the US for that in some respect, because for example the US had a operation called Fast and Furious, where they would give arms to drug cartels, supposedly to track them, but they didn't really track them at all. They just gave them the arms and that's it.
Okay.
And actually, AMLO criticized the U.S. government for that, and also one of the most dangerous drug cartels in Mexico, who are Los Zetas, and they control the state of Tamaulipas, which borders Texas, was formed by former Mexican military members who were trained by the U.S., if I'm correct. Yeah. So yeah, like the U.S. does have a lot to blame, and also the fact that El Chapo, La Barbie, who's another drug cartel like narco, they and many other ones, they work for the DEA, basically as like spies and stuff.
Okay, so now we have two very good questions. The first question is, how would a Marxist-Leninist informed analysis attempt to answer the question of drug cartels in Mexico? The second question is, does Hans anticipate will there be the formation of a leftist party in the wake of the Morena after AMLO?
Okay. With the first question, what does that person mean about the cartels? Like,
okay, well, yeah. What
specifically?
It's funny because it's toast. Can you elaborate your question because we need some help? Can you answer the second question while we're waiting?
Oh, sure. Well, with Morena, I'm not completely sure. Because basically Morena was made up from what used to be the kind of like the more left wing of the PRD, which the PRD used to be the main center left party. And basically, the reason why AMLO left the party was because in 2012, the then president Peña Nieto wanted to pass neoliberal reforms in the constitution, so he needed the support from PAN and the PRD. So they did a pact named the Pact for Mexico, where they passed all the neoliberal reforms. And AMLO decided to leave the party, and he formed his own party, which was Morena. The problem with Morena is that even though Morena did have like a good reason to be created, like an anti-neoliberal party was based on like we could say like sort of center left, like policies. The party started to accept a lot of people who used to be from the PRI, from the PAN, from the neoliberal faction of the PRD, and sadly, Morena is now more of a catch-all party. I wouldn't really say it is left-wing; it is more catch-all. Like it does still have some more like center-left elements, but it has many which are just centrist or even center-right or even a little bit more to the right. Like it's sort of like a mess, and I think that really affected to some extent Morena in these elections. As I said, Morena did pretty good, but it's because the opposition sucks. Like nobody wants the opposition. Well, of course, some people do, like the middle, high class, the rich people, white Mexicans, those sort of people like the opposition, but the average Mexican doesn't like them. And that's the reason why Morena right now is doing so good, despite the errors that they have done. Because Morena recently got a new party president, And he's
Who?
the one who's actually putting a lot of candidates who used to be from the PRI, who used to be
Ah,
from PAN, and the party back in 2018 also had, candidates who used to be from PAN in the PRI, but it wasn't, as common as right now. Like right now, the candidates for most states used to be from those parties, when it comes to governorship elections. But, the hatred for the opposition is so big right now that people still back AMLO. But many leftists are concerned that if the party doesn't change direction,
uh-huh.
that it could really cost them not the 2024 elections. I don't think that the 2024 elections will be won by the opposition
Uh-huh.
because the opposition is so bad that I doubt they will do good because they are not even good at promising new things. The only thing that they promise is that they are going to oppose everything that AMLO does, but they are not bringing anything new to the table. So that's why people are not really like um no, I'm really happy about the opposition, and also because the opposition who are PAN, PRI, PRD used to be like political enemies, and now they're all together. Like people see like they don't really have like an actual ideology. They only want to be against AMLO for the sake of being against AMLO. You know what I mean? But if there will be a new leftist party, I don't know if that will happen, honestly, because right now the what we could call the Mexican left is in Morena. So I don't know. There's not really like any sign of any new political formation right now,
Okay,
but
so
I
we have
don't know
another
if
question.
things will change later.
Do you sense the majority of the people's consensus is moving left, right, center?
Okay. I think that back in 2018,
Uh-huh.
it was definitely more towards a left wing direction. Like when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to, like economics, social issues, definitely Mexico was turning more to the left. But right now, I think that they're still turning to the left,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing is that the right wing is getting more radicalized than
Okay, so the
before.
right wing is getting like kind of like in the US where they're getting stronger.
Yeah, like for example, these elections, I think that the reason why Morena didn't do as good as last time in 2018 is because some people didn't vote, and right wingers were more how can I say it?
Energized.
Yeah, yeah, energized to go vote, especially in Mexico City. Because right now, people are really concerned about what happened in Mexico City because it is the stronghold of the left. Um, the left were governing Mexico City for over 20 years. PAN didn't have any power there. PRI didn't have any power there as well. But now they got half of the city, you know? And the reason is that the middle high class rich people, they got out to vote more, while poorer
Because
people
they okay, so they showed
didn't
up in
vote.
higher numbers, and it's also easier to get
Yeah,
them to vote because they have a stable address and all these kind of identifications, et cetera, right?
yeah, and not only that, but I mean, I think that they were basically mobilized by the like this propaganda that AMLO is a communist, that
Oh
is
God.
against rich people and all of that, which is crazy because AMLO is not really that left wing. In like like even though it is still stupid to call, I don't know, for example, Lula
Yeah.
a communist, it is
Hmm.
even more dumb to call AMLO like that because he's way more moderate. So
Oh
it's
yeah, he's more
like,
moderate than Lula.
yeah, so it's like really stupid. And that's how radicalized the right wing in Mexico has gotten,
Okay.
you know?
I need, okay, so I'm gonna have to find this one. So AMLO calls them Fifi, which is like an old French term. But there was this
Yeah.
lady, like somebody like was trying to get like this Texan was trying to get her to say something, and she's like, the
Oh, yeah,
problem
I
with
remember that
Mexico is
video.
that there's too many Cubans here. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, and
And I
also,
think she meant black people, right?
oh, Yeah, the right wing is really racist in Mexico. I mean, if you see Mexican Twitter right now, there's a lot of classist and racist, tweets made by right wingers against people who voted for Morena, because they're always trying to portray voters from Morena as being uneducated and poor and who
Mm-hmm.
just want to rely on the government, when in actuality, the people who elected AMLO back in 2018, they actually had more, how can I say it? They were usually like, like people who had degrees and who
Mm-hmm.
were more middle class, which is kind of weird, and younger voters, like the ones who voted for AMLO and people, like in urban areas. But somehow the opposition is has this idea that only poor people voted for AMLO, people who have no education, and that's like this stereotype that they have. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of racism and classism, especially in the case of um, places like Mexico City or the north of Mexico is.
Aha. That's very okay. Oh God. Okay. Yeah. So we talked about that. Somebody like mentioned the Nation's dumb article about AMLO, and we're just gonna ignore that because it's full of crap. Um, and any other questions or comments for Hans? Because I think we have you for about 5 more minutes, so I don't want to keep you up too late. What time is it there?
Right. Oh, it's 5:30
Oh,
p.m.
okay. Never mind. I don't know why I thought you guys. Okay, so we won't be. Okay,
Yeah,
so does
I
anyone have
have
any?
the
Can you just stay here for just a few more minutes to see if like we have any questions or comments?
sure.
So in the meantime, somebody said that there's an article that Brian Mayer just tweeted out, and I'm going to share it in the chat for people to look at what Fujimoro did. And hopefully, mm, so yeah, what was it? Oh yeah, I guess yeah, that's about it. But thank you so much. And I guess yeah, we need to have you come back again shortly to kind of go over all of the intricacies that's going on in Mexico because there's so much and it's like hard to keep track of everything.
Yeah, and it's really difficult, especially for me, since I live in Tijuana, which is in the border, and our
It's
reality
near
is
San Diego,
really,
right?
yeah, just below San Diego, and our, like the context here, the circumstances that we have are really different from Mexico City, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or the South,
Oh
which,
yeah.
like in
Masa.
all ways, like culture, the policies that are being implemented,
Mm-hmm.
like my city, for example, we have a long history of having, like the drug cartel violence and the, like immigration and militarism,
Mm-hmm.
while Mexico City doesn't really have that. Like they don't really suffer the effects of militarism, which I think
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the reasons why they were less afraid for, voting for the right. I think that's one
Ah,
of the
because they don't.
reasons.
Okay, I see now. Because they're kind of insulated because you can't really do much inside. 20 million people live there. 30 million. It's a big city.
It's yeah, about, well, the metropolitan area is about 22 million people, a
Yeah.
little
Okay.
bit bigger than New York
It's
seems.
about
Yeah,
as big as Bombay then.
yeah, it's a really big city, and yeah, and I think a big reason as well is that in Mexico City they haven't been governed by the PRI and from a really long time, like since the 90s. So a lot of generations don't really remember what it's to be governed by the opposition, by the right. So I think that's a big reason as well. Well, here, for example, in my city, that we were governed 30 years or, by PAN, we know exactly how it is to be governed by the right. So people are just traumatized. And even though Morena might not be perfect, we know it's like better to have them than to have the opposition being charged.
Aha. And that makes okay. So yeah, and in Mexico they're so insulated in the okay. Let's see. Um, somebody said I just want to say Hans is great, and I said yes. We're gonna have him back again. He'll be our Mexico correspondent. And thank you again, Hans, for coming and such a short notice. Next time we'll make sure that we give you a longer notice to prepare. But this was fantastic, so we really appreciate this.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, yeah. And after the COVID, we should like I was gonna come to like Tijuana for a little while, but then like the COVID thing came around, so maybe we'll have to figure this out next year again.
Well, if you ever come, you just tell me.
Okay. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Okay. So we're gonna hang out here for just a few more minutes to see if Dan Cohen is able to join us. If not, I guess we'll have him next week. So we're just gonna I don't know, what are we doing? Nothing really. I know what we could do. Let's see. I don't know. What are we? Okay. So okay. So we'll wait about 5 more minutes, and if not, we'll go on. Oh, Dan is here. Cool. Awesome. Okay, he's coming. He said he's on. Okay, great. Stay right here then, while Dan Cohen comes, while I get some water. So just stay right here. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, Dan.
Okay, perfect.
Asha just had a... Okay, here she comes.
Okay, I just got some water, but now I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm all right. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. And I understand
sweet.
that you have a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old? I forgot.
Yeah, a 1-year-old who acts like a 2-year-old.
Well, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, we won't wake up your 1-year-old.
Oh, she's awake. She doesn't go to sleep till like 11.
Yeah.
So
for a 1-year-old? 11 o'clock?
Yeah. Like 10, 11 sometimes, even 11:30. She's very
wow. That's wild.
energetic. Yeah.
Okay. So how are you doing? And you've been doing a lot of reporting on Colombia and the death squad violence. And the one thing that really got me is your reporting on the Israeli connection. So can you just unload with what you uncovered and how you uncovered it?
Yeah. Well, basically, there was an investigation that came out from a renowned Colombian journalist a few months ago named Alberto Donadillo, who showed that this genocide that took place from 1984 to 1982, basically the extermination of a left-wing political party in Colombia that was born out of a peace accord, and the party is called the Patriotic Union, was crafted by the president at the time, Virgilio Barco, whose daughter is still a prominent politician in the ruling party, and it was advised by a top Israeli spy named Rafi Eitan, and so that just didn't get any play in outside of Colombian media. It was like a scandal for a time in Colombian media, but in Colombia itself, but no one picked it up in English. And so I just took that and then took a lot of the other stuff that's already been reported and kind of put it all together and as the basis for like the Colombia-Israel relationship, and then brought that up to kind of the current day, put it in context of the current extermination of social leaders and ex-combatants, ex-FARC combatants who laid down their weapons as part of the 2016 peace deal.
Okay. So I had Dan Kovalik on a while back, and he was saying that a lot of times the military would just shoot people and then ex post facto say that they were FARC operatives. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It was a scandal called false positives. Basically, when there was a thing called a huge military aid package called Plan Colombia that started actually with the Clinton administration. And it was all about destroying the FARC. And it was, under the guise of like combating the drug war, fighting the drug war, but they gave all this money and weapons to a narco state. And So this continued on through the Bush administration, and basically in 2002 is when this practice supposedly started, where in order to meet the demands of the U.S., actually, this goes all the way up to the U.S.
Wow.
Which measured success in how many FARC guerrillas were killed. The government basically started, the military started telling, commanders and all the way down to kill.
They were getting compensation for
Yes.
a per head count. Wow.
Yeah, that's how the U.S. measured success. Exactly, is by number of guerrillas or supposed guerrillas killed, and so that totally incentivized, killing anyone and dressing them up as a guerrilla. And so that's what they did. They would literally lure people out. They, with the promise of work. Like a young man, a poor guy in the countryside would tell his mom, "Hey, I got this job opportunity. I gotta just go down to this corner," and then they would kidnap him, kill him, put him, dress up in combat fatigues, and then take a picture and say, "Oh, we killed this gorilla and that one." And actually, soldiers would even get, time off, or they would get financial compensation and this kind of thing. So that was one of the big scandals that even just a few months ago, it came out. There was a special peace court called the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, created in the 2016 Peace Accord. That this peace court found that there were at least 6,402 cases of this, and they will continue to uncover more. And there was another study a couple of years back that found that there were at least 10,000 cases. So this is, just one of the huge scandals, and this is all, happened under the guise of Plan Colombia and the, far right-wing president and ally with bipartisan U.S. support, Alvaro Uribe.
Uribe, the older guy, the older president.
Duque is his basically his protege. Uribe remains the most powerful politician in the country and just runs the show completely. Duque is just his front man.
Okay. And what? So there's also protests going on right now. What are they protesting? What kind of violence are they responding with? Can you just quickly go over that?
Yeah. So there's a national strike that started in response to these this so-called tax reform, basically austerity measures that would just increase taxes on poor working class people, middle class people. And Colombia is already in a huge amount of poverty that's only gotten worse with the pandemic. There's the official statistics are 43% poverty, 15% extreme poverty. So
wow.
It's really grim. And then it gets even worse in the pandemic, and they tell people, "Oh, now we have to increase the price, of all kinds of basic necessities in order to balance the deficit that was created." And it's just all neoliberal economics. That's why there's a huge deficit, and there's no national, none of the companies they're all owned privately, so there's no reserves to balance the budgets. They just have to. The only place they can take it from is the working class, and they're not going to take it from the rich people that own the government. So basically, you have these mass protests that broke out, and there have been protests in years before, but this is a totally another thing. Labor unions at the head of it, students, and just young people and indigenous people. And it's gone on for more than a month, and they've suffered really brutal, horrific violence. You have basically cops and military killing people. You have paramilitaries killing people, just coming out and opening fire on demonstrators. And so, it's still going on, but it's pretty grim. And it's hard to say. I don't really have any sense of how long they'll continue to keep it up. But just the fact that they've done so to this point is pretty remarkable. With total impunity, this government.
Okay. Earlier last month, you wrote another article about this Chilean neo-Nazi that's helping the Colombian police on strike breaking. Can you elaborate a little bit about that now?
Yeah. So a few months ago, the Colombian military brought in this Chilean neo-Nazi, and literal neo-Nazi. I mean, I'm not using Not
Got
saying
it.
he's like a
No, no.
fascist as like a.
No, I've seen the symbology. We just put it in the chat so people understand that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's a real Nazi. And his name is Alexis Lopez Tapia, and you know, Chile. Of course, there's a big history of Nazis in Latin America. You know, left Europe, and we saw them in the Bolivia coup, and so they're in Chile too. They have a history in Chile, and so this guy was brought in by the Colombian government to basically give the police and military an ideological framework of how to understand the protests, and basically just says this has nothing. There are no legitimate grievances. This has nothing to do with class. And he takes it and puts it in this like postmodern framework, and he calls it the dissipated molecular revolution. That it's not top down, it's all horizontal, and so it can be anyone, and it's basically just to turn anybody who might be protesting or who might be standing near a protester into a total enemy of the state. It's like this postmodern fascism.
Is that to like psychologically allow for the police to just mow them down?
Yeah, I mean, it's like all of this exactly, this kind of like weird framework to basically just tell the police, yeah, just kill them. That like that's all you got to do is just kill them, and that's what they've been doing. And so there was a tweet that Alvaro Uribe put out about a week into the protests, like referencing this dissipated molecular revolution, and people were like, "What is that?" And then it turns out that's a reference to this neo-Nazi. So, I mean, for me, it's interesting that, like, on one hand, you have the Israeli military training these guys, training the Colombian army, and then at the same time, you also have a Chilean neo-Nazi. So, I mean, a lot of people might think there's, like, a contradiction there, the, like, so-called Jewish state and, like, some Nazi coming in, but of course, we know that Israel is always tight with Nazis.
Oh, yeah, Netanyahu's son, yeah, he was like hanging out with the Ukrainian Nazis for a while, right?
I don't know.
Whatever. He did something weird. Yeah, but you also I know. Okay, we have you for about 5 more minutes. Okay. You also talked about how a lot of the protesters are showing up dead in a river. Is that in like what's going on there?
Well, I mean, there's a long history of that in Colombia, of basically the police, and in Latin America in general, but of police disappearing people, and then they turn up in a river, killed. And so that's happened a bunch of times recently, where it's clearly a police tactic, in the Cauca River, and I mean, it's just nightmarish stuff where the police, I don't know how many dozens, I think even hundreds of people have been disappeared at this point. They're totally unaccounted for.
And that is just from this last protest, right?
Just this current round of protests, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. So there, these images coming out. There are some videos where it's like you see the police taking people away, and then the next day or 2 days later, there they are on the side of a river or in a river. And I mean, I tweeted these videos, the ones I guess you're referencing in photos, and it's like I hate to do it because they're just so gruesome, but at the same time it's like they gotta people have to see what's really happening.
Oh yeah, it's very gruesome. And for me, the biggest thing is that like the American media screams about Venezuela, but there's like a good case to be made that whatever's going on in Colombia is much worse, and they're all so quiet when it comes to Colombia.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's not even a case to be made. There's just no comparison. I mean, Colombia is by far worse. It has the world's largest internally displaced population in the world. Worse than Syria, which has undergone a horrid, dirty war. Worse than Afghanistan, and it's 2 decades of war. And all we hear about in U.S. media is Venezuela, but it's all projection of what's happening in Colombia. There are huge amounts of people killed, disappeared. There have been, since the 2016 peace accord, which Antony Blinken today praised and said the U.S. is, helping Colombia implement it, there have been almost 1,200 social leaders murdered. There have been about 250 ex-combatants, ex-FARC fighters who agreed to lay down their weapons and integrate into society, and they're being exterminated, just like they were in the 80s with the whole with the extermination of the Patriotic Union. So it's just, this thing playing out again and again, that it's like there's a peace accord, and then people agree to go from armed struggle into politics, electoral politics, and then the state murders them in mass. And so it's just happening again and again, and no one, it's like here and there in the media. But if you compare the coverage, and not only the coverage, but the style of coverage, the tone, the language they use, Maduro's authoritarian and this and that, and then they'll say like, Colombia is struggling with, the peace accord or something like that. Like, it's really trying, but just poor little Colombia, instead of actually this is, the intelligence agencies in the state just, murdering its people.
And the most of the displaced people are either indigenous or Afro-Colombian, right?
I don't know about most of them. I mean, certainly they disproportionately suffer, and but I mean, there are, not necessarily. It's not necessarily that everyone is that all the displaced people are. There are just tons of like peasants and farmers who are not necessarily like from indigenous nations that are or Afro-Colombians that are displaced or targeted. All kinds of people, including indigenous. Actually, there was a social leader just a few hours ago who was murdered. I mean, so it's like it's the stuff doesn't even hardly penetrate like left Twitter. You know what I mean? So it's like, how is it gonna? The New York Times is definitely not gonna pick it up.
No.
Which is something that I've kind of tried to take on myself, is to like open this up, and I appreciate you like digging into this too and doing it. So, but it just goes to show that it's like when it even like our kind of left Twitter circles that are really concerned with anti-imperialism in Latin America, that if it's not on our radar, then it's on like nobody's radar, at least in the U.S. Yeah.
Well, and so how do people find you? You have a Behind the Headlines is your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, I have. I'm doing this project called Behind the Headlines. We have a YouTube channel. Just Google Behind the Headlines.
No, yeah, we'll put a link here, like it'll pop up, right?
Cool. And then you follow me on Twitter. I mean, I can go for a few more minutes if you want to keep talking.
Great. Okay. So, so I have a few more questions in that case. Let's see. Somebody asked, what is the current status of the protest movement today? Is it losing momentum?
Sadly, I haven't been able to get to Colombia for a number of reasons during this strike. So it's hard for me to really speak with authority on that. The people I'm in touch with, I hear kind of a variety of things. On one hand, it seems like people are really committed because, they've kind of made a choice to just stick this out. But at the same time, the brute violence that the state is using has definitely hampered some of people's ability to do that. Like, I have a friend in Cali, which has been like kind of the center of this whole uprising. I was talking to last night, and he's told me a lot of the like blockades, where this basically the core of the strike, a lot of those are not being run in the day anymore. They only operate them at night, and this is just because of the police violence. It's just been so unrelenting that they just can't do it. And like people are afraid that the police are just going to come in and murder them all. So I just don't know how people keep up such resistance in the face of just such unrelenting terror from totally unaccountable police and military and paramilitaries, and that and like the so-called international community is just totally hands off. Like nobody says anything.
You also wrote an article, like maybe a little while back, where you said that Biden was reviving, like Plan Colombia 2.0. Is that the same thing as like demilitarizing or whatever they call it, which basically ended up with like false positives? Like, is that what he wants to do some more of?
Well, I think basically the Biden approach is to destroy the peace accord. It's the same thing that Trump did. So basically, the U.S.'s goal, I think, with the peace accord was not to have actual peace, because the peace and everything that goes along with the peace accord. Because the peace accord itself, if you look at the different points, the tenets of the accord, they're actually pretty remarkably revolutionary. I mean, it talked about, redistribution of land, which is like it's a key thing, because the vast majority of the land is concentrated in the hands of a tiny few elite in Colombia, and so basically, peasants are just forced to work on land for the pittance that they don't own, and that's a big reason that the FARC even came into its existence. And so had that been, addressed, then it's a totally different country. It's a totally different situation. And then it's not as easy for U.S. corporations through, the pretext of free trade agreements to come in and just pillage the country and take all of its wealth, its oil, its minerals, its gold, everything, all these international corporations that are operating there. The important thing for the U.S. was that the FARC disarms. Basically, the whole point of Plan Colombia was to weaken the FARC to a point where the Colombian government could say, okay, now we've weakened you so much that we want to make peace. We want to get you to lay down your arms. So here are the terms. Let's negotiate this. And it took years. And after a really extreme campaign of weakening the FARC, wiping out its leadership with help from basically the CIA gave it the technology to be able to assassinate the top leaders. And so then the FARC makes this agreement. They lay down their weapons. They do everything they're supposed to. And then the government, even under the former president, Juan Manuel Santos, who negotiated the accord and agreed to it and, was given a Nobel Peace Prize, he did very little to implement it, even though it was his last, months as president. And then Duque comes in, who is campaigned totally against the accord, and it gets even worse. And so a lot of people thought that, like when I was in Colombia in December, right after Biden won, a lot of the ex-FARC people, ex-combatants, social leaders, a lot of them really thought that Biden was going to be better, that he wasn't going to be against the peace accord, that it was going to be a return to the Obama era of support for the peace accord because Trump and Duque were totally against it. And what's happened is, I was kind of skeptical then. I was like, I don't think Biden is going to actually be that way. And sadly, I was right. So Biden has basically been hands off as these exterminations continue. Blinken has just, pledged total support. And one of the key things that the government, that the Trump administration was pushing the Colombian government to do was to resume spraying glyphosate.
That's to kill the quote-unquote alleged coca plants or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's to kill. It's supposedly to kill coca plants, but it's really just serves. It's like a phony way of combating coca growth, the coca crops. But it does actually very little because there's so much, and if they just spray in one area, they just plant in a different area. But what it does very effectively is it makes the farmers very angry and generates conflict, and also generates huge amounts of revenue and profit for the companies like Bayer that owns Roundup, for the corporations that profit off of this. So it's a huge moneymaker, and it doesn't actually do what it's supposed to. And so Trump was pushing that, and then Biden comes in and everyone's like, oh, he's going to be great, he's going to stop doing that, we'll go back to the peace accord. And Biden's State Department has continued. It's put out a document 2 months ago, a policy document saying the Colombians need to resume spraying glyphosate, and if they do that, well, then the farmers are, and some of the ex-combatants, they're going to take up arms and start shooting at those planes. And so not only is it profitable, it's a perfect way to generate conflict and further undermine the peace accord, which is the real goal of the United States.
And who profits from this? I guess you mentioned the Bayer Monsanto group. Anyone else profiting from this?
Well, I mean, you look at, for one thing, there's more cocaine coming out of Colombia than ever. So, and it's not like the years of the 80s and early 90s of Colombian drug cartels. It's all basically Mexican drug cartels that run the show now, like the Sinaloa cartel. And all the Colombians are basically they're just slaves of the cartels, essentially. The cartels, who of course serve our insatiable demand for cocaine. So on one hand, you have the cartels making huge amounts of money. There's also the fact that the international finance system really profits massively, does really well by laundering this money into its system. And when you look at, for example, the 2008-2009 financial crisis, one of the things that really helped keep the economy afloat from totally collapsing was injecting liquidity from cocaine. So basically, international drug trafficking helped keep the capitalist economy alive. You can also look at all of the companies that sell the chemicals and fertilizers and everything necessary to grow the coca plants, and process them. So I went to one of these like cocaine laboratories in Colombia, where it's basically where they take the coca leaves and put them in like gasoline and like various chemical substances in order to like start the process of making coca paste, which then becomes cocaine. And those are all expensive chemicals that people need, that are needed to make it. So you have gasoline that they have to buy, and then a bunch of fertilizers and pesticides and stuff like that are sold by like American corporations. So that's another group that profits. Really the big thing about cocaine is that it's such a perfect thing for international corporations, because it basically allows an area to be colonized by it turns it into like an underground world in a way. So if you have an area that's taken over by coca growing, then it's outside of the state. The state has a hands-off approach. It provides infrastructure for the coca to be grown, and then you have paramilitaries that come with it. And so the paramilitaries will basically terrorize the population into submission, and maybe expel them from the land. And then international corporations, oil, gold mining, then they can come in. So it kind of serves as like a Trojan horse in a lot of ways for like even
instead of like clearing instead of like these like Chevron itself doing what they did in Ecuador, which is like mowing down indigenous people, like the cocaine kind of pre-does it for them to go then mine or exploit or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and this was a wonderful Monday night stream, and hopefully we can have you guys back for another week.
Definitely look forward to it. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye. So everyone, please subscribe to us. Go to historically.substack.com and please subscribe, and click the whatever button, and hopefully we can have